It is 13 minutes after 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, where the front page headlines greeting you everywhere is what we discussed a short while ago, the issue that Mayor Tim Key will be resigning, and the world moves on. It is the hope. However, we've got a situation that we've got to go back to. Let me tell you about my guest. He's a Chartered Surveyor and Managing Director of Raymond and Pair Limited. He also holds a BS in Land Administration, is also a professional member of the RICS, which his specialization in valuation planning and development and property finance. He is a former member of the Joint Consultative Council, and just about everywhere you turn, you know he's involved. But equally important, he is the man who said, at my own cost, I am going to get information that the public is entitled to. He took that to court at his own cost, and the courts agreed with him. Well, after they agreed with him, we said, okay, fine, we'll all see this. Wait a minute, said the ruling government at the time. Not so fast, we will appeal. So the appeal process is standing. It is coming up for hearing. However, in the interim, we change governments. In changing governments, there was discussion between Mr. Raymond and the current Minister of Finance. There is the hope, the expectation that there will be a reversal of this appeal. Well, that's the hope and expectation. But you know, in life, you get many things you don't expect. And very, very rare do you get the things you hope for. Mr. Raymond, good morning.
What we call the Brunch effect. When you push your hand and you just pull out a figure or you pull out a position. So good morning, Minister Imbert, and good morning to the listeners. This morning I have on my Ambition cologne from J. Hugh Gordon, as well as my Renegades t-shirt. It doesn't mean I'm a renegade with ambition, but I'm not using the brand up approach. We have to take a principled approach to this question. This is the largest expenditure of public money in the history of our country, and the public deserves nothing less than a full accounting of that expenditure of public money.
We are going down all the way with that, but you know what they say, Yogi Bear kind of statement. The best way to begin is at the beginning. Take me to how we got into where we are. Take me to what was initially in 2009 an estimate of $5.6 billion. It was, however, revised in 2010 to $14.5 billion. And suddenly we hear now, as of January this year, we're talking about $25 billion. With $10 billion of that nobody can put their fingers on. Take me to the top of this. Bring our listeners into the fold on the assumption that they know nothing about what happened with Clico.
Okay, thanks, Rennie. What I wanted to say, good morning, listeners, and thanks once again to 107.7 and Rennie B, the brunch discussion show, hosting me once again on this important issue. There are so many other issues for us to discuss, and I'm glad to be given the time. Let me say that the collapse of CL Financial was reported to have taken place in January of 2009. I say reported to have taken place because there were indications that there were strong signs of a collapse prior. But the actual official date, because we're dealing with an official version, and we need to compare and contrast that official version with the truth. We're doing a bit of probing and testing to find out where the truth lies, to use a little mixed metaphor there. Where does the truth lie? The point is that the bailout date, the collapse date, was set as the 30th of January 2009. It was a Friday. I wouldn't forget that Friday. It was also the day of Central Bank Party, the first carnival fair I ever took my daughter to. But seriously, that was a very serious date, the Friday the 30th of January, and we were told, the country was told, that effectively the group had fallen into such serious financial difficulties that it needed assistance from the state, the treasury, happening through the agency of the central bank. And at that time, the estimate was in the region of $5 billion it would cost to clear up the mess and pay the debts. That memorandum of understanding, which is what they call the legal word for the document that was signed on the 30th of January 2009, that memorandum of understanding gave the government an obligation, if I can use that word, to pay the debts of CL Financial. And it gave CL Financial an obligation, a corresponding obligation, to sell assets to repay those monies that the government had spent. Now, it was then succeeded on the 12th of June 2009 by a shareholders agreement, which for the very first time put into the picture and put onto the agenda the rights of shareholders. Normally in these situations, the rights of shareholders are evaporated or extinguished because basically the company can't pay its debts, it can't pay its way. The company is fundamentally insolvent. And in fact, you can't go further, therefore your shares are worth zero. But in this situation, the 12th of June 2009 agreement was a particularly pernicious one because it claimed, the press release from the Ministry of Finance claimed that the 12th of June 2009 shareholders agreement was in furtherance of the 30th of January 2009 MOU of all of those terms. It wasn't. It added something. And what it added was that the rights of shareholders were to be defended, which is taking us to where we are now, where people like Mr. Dupree and so on still have his shares, despite all that has happened. So there are certain implications coming out of that. Now, the amount of money escalated, and as you said, Rennie, when the People's Partnership government won the election on the 24th of May 2010, the People's Partnership, in their first budget, Mr. Winston Dukaran gave his first budget on September the 8th of 2010, and on that occasion, Mr. Dukaran told us that, in fact, the country had spent about $7 billion on the bailout. The Prime Minister intervened because there was a furor. Dukaran proposed slowing down the payout and making people wait up to 20 years for their money, basically to reduce the strain on the treasury. He said, look, we can't continue paying money at this rate. Money is very low and so on. And there was a huge furor. A number of organizations formed, policyholders groups and depositors groups, and so some of them have been in the press together with my own efforts. And what happened is that Mrs. Prasad Bisesa gave a speech on the 1st of October 2010, which is really quite a very interesting and a seminal speech in the history of this whole thing, where she more or less said, listen, this thing cost $7 billion. We don't know where it's gone. And that is a scandal. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa said, that is a scandal. Because you came to the parliament in January of 2009. You told us you need $5 billion. It was a shock to everybody. We went along. We couldn't do anything. Now we get into office and we check the books. And over $7 billion has been spent. But you told us $5 just a year and a half ago. So that's the beginning of the problem. You see, because we're trying to describe the problem, when it happened and what happened. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa went further. So she expressed outrage at the fact that an estimate of 5 had escalated to 7 point something. I think it's 7.2 is the figure. B, she went further and said, we need another $7 billion to pay everybody. So in fact, we were looking at about 14.3 billion in total. This is the estimate, and I'm calling it an official estimate because they came in a prepared speech of the Prime Minister to our Parliament. It's not old talk. This is our Prime Minister at the time. And her estimate at that time was between 14.2 and 14.3 billion dollars to pay everything. And of course, the third important part about that speech was that the Commission of Inquiry, the Coleman Commission, was initiated. So it was established and so far. We're not on that right now. Now, fast forward the tape, and we get to the 3rd of April of 2012. And Winston Dukaran, who was then the Minister of Finance, Mr. Dukaran is in court because he's been sued by certain policyholders. And one of them is my dear friend, my elder friend, I hope he's listening, Mr. Percy Farrell. Percy Farrell, the case is actually called Percy Farrell and others against the Minister of Finance. And Percy took the Minister of Finance to court to recover certain monies and so on. The details of that case don't need to detain us. The point is that Mr. Dukaran, as Minister of Finance, responding to the lawsuit, had to give an affidavit. In Mr. Dukaran's affidavit, paragraphs 21 and 22, Dukaran says something that's really interesting. He says, in 21, we have spent $12 billion. This is 3rd of April 2012. He goes on to say in paragraph 22, we need another $12 billion to finish it. So,
what was the justification?
It's just really just like that. Yes. Under oath in the High Court, Mr. Dukaran's affidavit of the 3rd of April 2012. So, we have the picture shifting again. And again, I'm calling that an official statement. That's a statement from the sitting Minister of Finance in a sworn affidavit to the High Court. This is not old talk.
Prime Minister's statement, we have money about $5 billion that's unexplained. Then we get the Minister of Finance coming in, and we have more money that's missing. So that's part one and part two of the scandal.
But it gets even more interesting. Because shortly thereafter, this was the 3rd of April 2012. Shortly thereafter, Mr. Dukaran shifted his offices and he was put into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And who came into the Ministry of Finance, I think it was in June of 2012, was Mr. Larry Hawaii, who had been the head of FCB for many years. Larry Hawaii is an accountant, a respected banker, and so on. He jumped into the politics and he became our Minister of Finance. Fine. Mr. Hawaii's first budget was on the 1st of October 2012. So we talked discussing 6 months. Stay with me here. Stay with me. The first date is the 3rd of April 2012. And the figure then was $12 billion. $12 billion had been spent. Mr. Hawaii is giving a budget statement, which again is a formal statement from the sitting Minister of Finance to the Parliament, probably the most serious and sober formal statement in our political year. It's a budget. Okay? Mr. Hawaii is given the budget on the 1st of October 2012, and he says to the Parliament, we have spent 19.7 billion. So in the space of 6 months, we had gone from 12 to 19.7. And these are some of the explanations we want to delve into in requiring this information to be produced, because these are glaring things. These are scandalous things. This is a huge amount of money being spent in a situation where, as I said in the last occasion I was here, Rennie, I think I was having a little back and forth with Dr. Winford James. And I was saying to him, but Winford, what the scandal is that in fact there's no soap in the hospital. There's no toilet paper in the hospital. But we have $25 billion.
That is
to give to some of the wealthiest people in the country.
Let us go into
on an interest-free loan. I mean, really. And rolling forward, Randy, just to kind of wrap up the discrepancies with the figures. Rolling forward, we have situations where the figures have fluctuated. So 19.7, we never went lower than that. We went up to 20, we went to 21. And Ram Logan, who was the then Attorney General, gave a formal press release from his office, which I also consider to be one of the highest offices in the country. The Office of the Attorney General made a formal press release in May of 2014 saying that the figure was over 25 billion. So we are proceeding on a journey, for what reason I don't know, to what destination we don't know, and it's not acceptable because that money is our money.
Let us see if we can get this really clear now. We are talking about discrepancies happening from 2010 all the way up as far as how the money is spent. As we know, if you are a private investor, then a private depositor, then your information is sacrosanct. It is protected by law, etc., etc.
Yes.
The departure from that, however, happens when the public funds are put into it, then the public must know about this money being spent. The reason I go there is to ask you this. Between 2010 and now, between 2010 and 2014. Why were we not getting an explanation? Since public funds were being expended in this rescue, why were we not along the way getting clarity as to who's receiving this money?
Well, I think that a tremendous scam, I'm going to say it, a tremendous scam has gone down. We were told it was a financial emergency and that the country's pensions and the country's financial stability were at risk. That was what we were told in January of 2009. And that was the justification given for the whole exercise, the MOU and the shareholders agreement and so on. And we were told that, and I think, pardon me, with a few exceptions like myself and so, I think broadly that was accepted. That in fact we would need about $5 billion to solve this problem, and it wouldn't take long because there were other assets that could be sold. But what in effect has happened, and we need now to come off of the figures now, and let's deal with some of the institutional arrangements. Because the figures are one level of the discourse. Let's go to another level of the discourse, institutional arrangements. What in fact has happened is this. All of the safeguards that protect, or that what I have called the integrity framework of the country, that would protect our investments and our national interests, have been disconnected in this case. And I'm going to be methodical and explain what I mean. Clico is an insurance company. CL Financial is a finance company. Up until very recently, Clico didn't have regular accounts. They started to publish accounts now. But that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for CL Financial's accounts.